we had a plan, our CDP plan was that in 20 years we're going to be 20% food sustainable. That didn't happen. But we can still try. And how? For us to make things happen, we need water.
Ola itawai, water is life. So let our summit begin. When I think of the past also in Kohala, I think about the once very beautiful waters of Honokane flowing through the Kohala ditch. Kohala Sugar Company closed in 1975. We had a couple of earthquakes. The ditch broke 2006, which you are all aware of. In 2008, it was repaired, restored, and ran again. And then 2 years ago, the same area that broke in 2006 got destroyed again by landslides. And the ditch has been off since. But the sugar company closed in 1975, but we still had the waters of Honokane providing agricultural water to our community for 47 years after that. The roots that we have is cultivating, stewarding land, taking care of the aina, growing food, and knowing the next generation will be okay. When I think of the present, I think of, we don't have a ditch right now. We don't have any ag water. So when COVID came, I'm sure all of you felt it and was concerned about food shortage, fuel shortage, workforce shortage, supply and demand shortage, equipment shortage, on and on and on. So when I think of present, I think of that. And I think we don't have water. When I think of the future, I think about seeing the Kohala ditch run again. Maybe. I think about other water sources that are available. That's why we're here to talk about that. But the future gives us the opportunity to dream and to plan. We are here for the future. And all of you, your input is very important.
Aloha everybody, and thank you all for being here today. What strategies are being implemented by Kamehameha Schools Bishop Estate to ensure the long-term availability and quality of water resources for traditional agricultural practices in Kohala?
You know, for Kamehameha Schools, I start with that question focusing on traditional agriculture, right? And then it's how do we get water to support those practices? And you know, for a lot of our land holdings in Kohala and throughout the state, you know, we do have a legacy of our lands that you know are in pretty much intact Abarcar, like Honokane, most parts of Waimea and so forth. So I say that in the context of, you know, we got to think about it from Mauku to Makai, and how water flows through our Abarcars, and to do that, you know, we gotta invest in our watersheds, right? We gotta invest in our forests. We're a member of Kohala Watershed Partnership. Work well with with the state and others on really prioritizing areas that we're gonna help. You know, not just with our land as a landowner, but it's gonna help the overall watershed. Where are the priority areas, and how can we preserve the uplands to then, you know, provide more quantity industries in the ground as well, and then also then support the practices that happen, you know, let's say along the streams in Kohala. And as I've been, you know, through my tenure at Waimea, looking at, you know, being in some of the gulches, you know, there are the remnant systems that were in agriculture, particularly I think of like Waiapuka area and Waikama, and we've done a ton of archaeological studies, and we've had archaeologists come in document them, and I feel like the next step, kind of looking at the past, what it is today, the present, and the future, is now how do we activate those places to grow food? How do we engage the community in those places for traditional agriculture? So I think those are some of the strategies that we should look for to one, help the overall watershed and bringing water to all of Kohala and feeding the land, but also then, how do we engage our local communities in those practices so we don't lose those practices.
What is KSBE's current viewpoint on the Kohala ditch restoration specifically, and would they be open to entering a new water agreement?
I think we're open to discussions about the Kohala ditch. As Bill pointed out, the history and the current history with that, we're really cognizant about the health and safety issues of managing the ditch, the operational costs as well. But we're open to discussions. But we do feel like we've got to balance, like Bill was also saying. How do we balance the ecological and cultural values that are in the stream, and then with the ability to provide agricultural water throughout Kohala, and we support ag, of course. We also want to support our traditional and ecological values in the stream. So we just got to find a balance, and then how do we kind of modernize the system and look at different ways to gather water and find a balance on that.
So what do you see your role of what do you see as the role of the Kohala Ditch Company, and what are the long-term goals?
The Kohala Ditch Company was acquired from Surety Corporation, which was the surviving entity of Kohala Sugar Company. And they basically had divested from agriculture and most of the ownership of the land. And there was an act of need on their side for the water, and frankly, the motivation to do anything with it. And I felt, as the largest user from the prairie when it was running, and the future that we envisioned, growing crops, it's an important resource. It's been always a community resource. From inception, it was actually Kohala's utility company. There was no connection outside of Kohala. The water, potable water, the power, everything was generated by the Kohala Ditch until the 1950s when they, electric took the power and became purely agriculture. But it's always been a community resource. And we feel that this is an incredible infrastructure in our community that will be here, in my opinion, generations to come, and companies and people come and go, but this resource will stay. And we need to be the stewards of it today, and what we do with it, and what the need for it looks like. Because the landscape has changed. What sugar company Kohala Sugar did is very different than we all do today. And what does that look like? And how can we conserve that water, both on the use side as well as in the transfer of it? So there's a lot of things to be figured out by people that are more familiar and the experts, but the goal is to keep that ditch going, and we're motivated to do that.
I was wondering if you could share any plans to increase access to the agricultural water in our community.
Putting a pipeline in is what we're looking at today, rather than an open ditch, and the sources that are available closest to the dry side, and working backward and getting everybody, all the owners together, because Kohala Ditch is very different than it used to be, where it was one entity. Now we've got multiple entities that really need to come together and develop a sound plan.
Questions for Ta'apo from Iole. So, Ta, as stewards of over 2,000 acres of an intact ahupua'a with a fragile water system and a portion of the inactive ditch, what are Iole's long-term plans for agriculture and water systems, and how will that benefit our community?
I'll start by saying
I took the CO position at the start of this month, July 1st, officially. The land that came over to us at the end of 2022. For those of you that don't know, the 2,400 acres was built on the 2,408 acres came over from New Moon Foundation to Hawaii Community Foundation. Iole is a partnership between Hawaii Community Foundation, the University of Hawaii, and Arizona State University. And I share that because to the question of what is our plans from an agriculture and those elements, our effort is not going to be to do agriculture on the land. Our role and what our goal is to create models around sustainability and climate issues, which will include agriculture. So what we are trying to do is find the right ways and the right models that dealing with today's climate world and what is happening in our environment can be done on the lands throughout this Kohala region. And I really appreciate the chance to meet with the large landowners within the region and other community members to start to understand what it is. Because one thing I look at is we need to understand the baseline first, right? Where we are, we need to understand the history to figure out into the discussions of where we're going. And so from what I've heard and learned so far, I think the only role of what we will try to do from a policy and strategy standpoint is be a source of water for the ditch. So I love what Bobby shared about where their plans and what they're looking at. We've had these discussions of the opportunity to put water back in the ditch. But because of everything that Bill shared as to why there's water not in the ditch now, and the fact that we need to find new sources, as I look at our lands and see two main water tunnels that service our lands, and then the opportunity, I guess the other opportunity as we look at climate issues is, we know that rain is happening less frequently, but more heavily. And what I've been taught by John and others is therefore we need to capture, collect, store, and then transmit that water. Because otherwise that water, because it comes so heavy in shorter periods of time, is just creating runoff. Right? And so you put all of those things together, I think because of where we are located and the amount of rain we have, we can help serve some of that capture, collect existing water tunnels and find ways to put water into the ditch, the new form, I think it's called the new form of the ditch, in order to serve the community. I'll close by saying, because we have partners like Hawaii Community Foundation, University of Hawaii, and Arizona State University, we're hopefully bringing resources and academic thought into this effort that we'll work to put together. And again, create models, and whether we find something that can work on our lands, we want to be sure that we're sharing that with others. Not just here in Kohala, but island-wide, statewide, globally, to help impact some of the larger issues that it's not unique. Everyone is facing these types of issues around the world. We hope that we can play a part in solving some of that.
So as a steward of 4 miles of the Kohala Ditch, what do you envision as Goalkeepers Ranch's role in the future of this ditch?
So I took over the job of being a steward for approximately 7,000 acres of land in Kohala about 3 years ago. And the land that I'm responsible for taking care of has been kind of the victim of a lot of deferred maintenance, let's put it that way. And so my main work has been focused on restoring the land, on clearing away all the invasives, on restoring some of the plantation infrastructure, like the field roads. And you know, the main thing that I think could be done in Kohala to take care of some of these streams is to clean them. You know, they're full of debris. There's just invasive ginger and all kinds of stuff sucking up water, sinks up their water. So there's actually a lot more water up there than probably it seems like when you're driving down the highway. So really, you know, part of my job, I feel, is to restore these streams, to clean them, and to.
So if the ditch is restored, is Goalkeeper Ranch willing to be a partner in helping the community gain and increase access to agricultural water?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I look at any project that I do up on the ranch, I ask myself 2 questions. Is this good for the land? Is this good for Kohala? And the answer is yes to those 2 questions, and this is a project I can get behind. So, of course, actions help my neighbors get some water and of course improve.
The Department of Agriculture manages other agricultural ditch systems in the state, using the 26-mile Hamakua ditch as an example. What resources are required to successfully manage operations and address maintenance issues?
Okay, Well, I think it varies on, every system's gonna be different. So we manage 4 irrigation systems, one on Oahu, one on Molokai, and 2 here on the Big Island, the Lower Hamakua Ditch and the Waimea system. So just looking at those 2, Waimea, we take water from way at the top of the mountain. Lower Hamakua Ditch, we take it at the, from the streams, the rivers. So some have pump systems, and your needs, resources are going to vary. Kohala, I'm sure, is a mixture of both high and low. It's a long system. So aside from the usual equipment, trucks, I think you need to have land, because you're going to need a base yard somewhere central where you can have materials stored. So for the state, it's very difficult because we're limited by budget. You can't just go out and...
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. You can't just go out and purchase materials whenever you want. You have to get approval. There's a whole process, so it takes time. And when you have some kind of emergency or fix that needs to be done, you have to plan for that. You can't just go out and fix it the next day. If you don't have some kind of base yard with extra materials and equipment, you're going to have delays. Farms are going to suffer. Another thing that is very important is the people, the users of the system. You need to have a good relationship, because they are the ones that's going to be able to see what's wrong with the system. Our guys are there just in the, passing by, cleaning the ditches, but the users are the ones that's going to report. There's a leak, there's vandalism, homeless. We have problems with homeless living along the ditch. So all these kind of things, I think, building a relationship with the community is quite vital.
So taking Waimea's 60 million gallon reservoir as an example, how could a project like this be implemented in North Kohala?
That's a long process, because you probably have to get a reservoir of that scale into the master plan somehow. And if you do so, you got to do an EIS, which could take several years. You have to go through all the environmental concerns, cultural concerns. It can be done, but it's going to take a long time.
So not impossible, but hard.
Not impossible, but it's takes a lot.
Yeah.
It's a big area.
Oh yeah. And you're just talking about land and things like that. So yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Glenn. Senator, as the constituents, we appreciate your help in addressing water resources in North Kohala, your advocacy for agricultural, and all that you do for our community. Please share an update on the $10 million that was appropriated for the restoration, including a timeline of when funding will be made available. What is allocated for, and who will be the recipient organization?
Critically important as we plan for our future. Before I get into that, just a couple of things so you know where my mindset's coming from. Bill gave some great history on Kohala Ditch. Kohala Ditch was engineered 100 years ago for approximately 70 million gallons of water a day. It averaged during the plantation era somewhere around 35 million gallons a day. More recent history, after the 2006 rebuilding, probably it was maybe 10 million gallons a day, somewhere in that vicinity. And I know there's concerns about environmental impacts and things like that. So how do we address all of this stuff? Also, from my government position, we're looking at the food self-reliance, food security. When I was born here, within a mile of here, we had 60,000 people living in the county on the Big Island. Today we have over 200,000. So we've tripled, 3.5 times our population. How do we work on our food security? This is where Kohala, I truly believe, can play a huge role in that because of our lands. If you do the math, and this is how I do the math, I look at almost any crop takes about 50 inches of rain a year. What that means is 1 inch of rain on your land, an acre inch, meaning how much rain does 1 inch bring to an acre of land? It's about 27,000 gallons. Normally, most crops, regardless of what we're talking about, is about 50 acre inches a year to thrive. Some are down to 30, some up to 60 or 70. But for a planning number, I use 50. If you go into Iole Valley, we don't need much irrigation back there because we have normal rains. If you come out to Kokuiki, we need a lot of irrigation. So looking at the lands from inside all the way coming outside, if we average that, 50 inches of rain across that, what do we need? Looking at 10 million gallons of water a day coming through the ditch would supply about 2,500 acres completely. But if we only need half of that because we need nothing inside by Nuli and we need full on the outside, if we average 25, long story short, we can irrigate somewhere around 5,000 acres of land in Kohala and produce. Okay, that's where I start. This is where my mind starts working. So how do we do that? And I appreciate every member on this panel talking about their perspective and what we're going to do going forward. I know there's a concern, what can we do with the ditch? We talked about pipeline. Just putting in a pipeline, the amount of water we don't lose, thereby the water we actually bring down the ditch, the efficiency of that water goes way up, which means we have to take less out of the valley, so we become far more efficient. I would argue that the 30 million gallons they were talking about, maybe 10 million, lucky if they actually were able to get that onto the land. So now, if we're putting this in a pipeline, whatever we take, 5 million or 10 million, will actually get to where we're having it go. And so that's the first big step. And the question is about funding. Back in 2006, when we had the earthquake, we were very fortunate to have Senator Inouye in Washington, D.C., and he was able to secure $6 million to fix the ditch. We can argue about if the repair was the right way to fix it. It doesn't really matter because it worked quite well for 15, 18 years, something like that. But then we had a landslide. And this isn't a new landslide. As the geologists tell me, this is an ongoing 1,000-year-old landslide. It's constantly doing that. The question is, so what do we do going forward? I am a big proponent of getting the ditch because it's a lifeline for Kohala. And selfishly, I want Kohala to be the breadbasket for a showcase for our state. We need to produce a lot more food, and Kohala can do it. We have the land, we have the land. But it's going to take commitment, and it's going to take commitment from the state side, it's going to take commitment from the community side, and I think we're starting to see that line up. Now, question was asked about the $10 million. Last year, when we have a biennium budget, last year in the budget, I was able to secure $10 million with the governor, and it made it through the legislature. Okay, we were theoretically had 3 years to do that. Because of Lahaina, they went back and they pulled a whole bunch of funding, and they pulled their $10 million for the ditch. I was not notified of this, which infuriated me. That being said, we know what happened in Lahaina. We know we needed the resources, but I was able to work with the legislature. And so the way it's working now, I was able to secure $1 million that will be readily available as soon as we need to spend it for planning and design. That's the first step. This next year, if you can believe, this is my #1 priority for getting funding to fix the ditch. And I used the number $10 million, a little bit out of the air, but it was $6 million back in 2006. I talked to some engineers who do this kind of thing. That's where I got the $10 million from. But that's only fixing the ditch. We talk about upgrading the ditch. How do we do that? This last June, I was in Washington, D.C. at USDA, and we were specifically talking about the funding for rural communities. I know this sounds kind of funny, but USDA, or Department of Agriculture, doesn't fund irrigation programs. But if we have to put in a ditch to get it to a potable water system, like we do in Waimea where it's filtration, okay, USDA will help fund that. So they would help fund a pipeline, getting it to, let's pick someplace, Iole Mill, where we run the water down, put it through a filtration system to make potable water. So why does USDA do that? It's because of the federal clean water needs for our food safety. And so they are willing to help support getting that done. Currently, the climate in USDA, they believe, and Secretary Vilsack believes this, that it's most important to have local resiliency for food production, not supply chains. Yes, we need supply chains, but local resiliency. Kohala is primed for this. We have the land, we have the potential water, we have the potential workforce. What we need to do is put this all together. In my lifetime, this is the first time I've seen where things are starting to align. So what is my job? To secure the funding for construction. Oh, I think the other question was, who's going to get the funding? Touch on that in a second. Is that once we get this in plan, is to secure that funding for construction and then work on further, kind of a phase 2 in my mind, about improving the ditch and finding the funding for that. Who would accept the funding? It's a little different, but then again, we're from Kohala. We're always a little bit different, right? What it's going to be is it has to be an entity that's a 501c3, and we're fortunate that Surety did put this in place, and we have the Kohala Ditch Cooperative, which is a 501c3, so they can accept the funding, and there should be no problem with that, and then we'll get a contract and we go from there. The pass-through is the Department of Agriculture, and that has been clarified to me by the Attorney General. I think I covered all your questions.
That was perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
So starting panel 2 will be water and land resources. So our first question will be for Hawaii Department of Agriculture Deputy Director Dexter Kishida. Please share with us the present administration's vision for agriculture in North Kohala. In the early 1990s, there was an EIS for agricultural parks in the Polu area. Please share the potential for state agricultural land availability and the possibility of ag parks in North Kohala.
First question, what is the administration's view? Statewide, we're really wanting to go big on ag, and I think you'll start hearing this statement a bit. And it's really buying, investing, and growing agriculture statewide. In North Kohala, you have, I think Senator said it best, just in the last 15, 20 years of me working in different aspects of the food system, North Kohala has done a bunch of organizing on how to increase your food self-sufficiency. And so investing in that, it's prime time to do that. We have a legislature, I feel, that is really supportive of agriculture right now. And really the department can't do a lot, at least funding-wise, without their assistance. And you have a senator that is a huge champion and can articulate the needs really well to the fellow members. So it's a really key time to go big. The second piece of it all is we realize there's some big, hairy problems, and you're dealing with two of the really big, hairy problems today, land and water. And you kind of can't have one without the other. And we know there's a lot of land. And the simple solution is saying, Department of Ag, create an ag park, and that's what happens, right? We could do that. But I don't know if that's always the best option. I think my engineer, Glenn, kind of shared, right? Sometimes the state makes things overly complex. So is there another way that we can do this as a community to make it even more functional? Possibly. But if not, maybe asking Senator to give us money to buy a property to get an ag park might be a way. We also have a sister agency at Dept, that's the Agribusiness Development Corp. They also, in statute, have power to buy land. And so if there is a lot of interest that they can document for certain sizes of acreage of farming, maybe ADC is another route that we go to get more land activated in agriculture, but is that the only issue? And so as the department, we're actually going through this really intense process now, and Hawaii County has been helping us go through this across the state even to better articulate what the real issues are in why ag isn't activated. Because we have the land, there is water, cost we know is one big thing, but another issue I see in this area is possibly market. How do we better get all the products to market so people can buy what you're growing? The last piece about upolu, that's probably a little bit outdated at this point, but there is work, and I'll wait for Dean guys to maybe speak a little bit more on where upolu is at now. The department was only kind of tangentially involved in the current aspects of upolu as in the water systems, but for the land, last we sat down with Senator Inoue and kind of looked at some of or what land was available, and everything we knew of or we saw had a landowner that we weren't notified was willing to sell yet. So if that is changing, then it's definitely something to look at as we kind of rethink how we grow and feed ourselves. Thank you.
Dean, please explain the function of the commission and its impact on agricultural water in Kohala.
Well, thank you for the question. So yeah, the commission's role is, for those of you that may not be aware of the commission, so we have statewide responsibility on protecting and managing the state's water resources. We do have a dual mandate of both protection, but also making sure that it's available for reasonable and beneficial use. The role for agriculture in Kohala. So yeah, we've been, over the years, we've worked with Department of Ag and others, Surety Corporation prior, and our staff has been looking at the streams out here. And so we've been trying proactively, with the expectation that water will be diverted again at some point. How do we balance those users, as Peter mentioned, with his properties, and Todd mentioned with Iole. Whenever you have a situation with, and Jason, of course, with Kamehameha Schools, we want to make sure there's a balance between the protection of the resources and how that water is used. One of the big things in working with the Department of Ag is going to be the agricultural water system development plan to see what those needs for the system are, what the needs by the community are, and how we balance that with our natural resources, of course. And that's really the commission's role in all of that.
So first question, from your perspective, please explain how restoring Makai stream flow is possible.
Sure, and thank you for the question. Aloha kako, just to reiterate, Katie Roth, I'm the Planning Program Manager with the Commission on Water Resource Management. The Commission is responsible for a lot of different things. As Dean mentioned, we have a huge mission and mandate to basically protect, regulate, and manage all of Hawaii's freshwater resources, so both water from the ground and surface water or streams. So thinking about Mauka to Makai flow and our involvement in that, we are obviously, one of the main entities responsible for managing water statewide. We are considered the trustee of water. So it's our obligation as a state agency to do all that entails. But we can't do it alone, so we rely on a variety of partners and other water management agencies and entities. I know there's some folks here from Division of Forestry and Wildlife, we have our watershed partnerships, and that's really, where the work begins. Upland, in our Mauka area is the source of our fresh water, our native forests. So at the commission, when we're making decisions about water allocations, where to permit wells, even dealing with conflicts over who gets water and how much, we can't have those conversations or fights without water at the source. So protecting our forests, I think, is of the utmost importance. We do not do that work. We rely on our partners like DOPA and the watershed partnerships to do a lot of the actions on the ground. We can advocate for funding to support that work. We also have, as Dean mentioned, we have a variety of plans, including the Hawaii Water Plan. The Ag Water Use and Development Plan is one component of that larger Hawaii Water Plan, but it also includes a Water Resource Protection Plan. And within that plan, we talk about the importance of, Mauka to Makai flow of water, the importance of watershed health more generally and broadly. We do have partnerships with our Makai agencies like Division of Aquatic Resources. We're obviously working with both public and private landowners that occupy kind of that middle area between our mountains and oceans. It's a group effort when it comes to managing our freshwater resources, and the role of planning and my role within the commission is really to bring all those partners and agencies together to have those conversations about how we can actually make that happen. Aaron can probably comment a bit more on intermittent stream flows, and that's one way we can restore stream flow and make that Mauka connection.
Please explain the permitting and regulatory processes for surface water and wells. And next question would be, if the USGS test wells are no longer being used, what would be required in order for farmers to be able to access them?
Thank you. I might as well introduce Dr. Aaron Strauss. He's a hydrologist with the Stream Protection Master Plan.
Doctor, there may be a few questions here that you can answer. First thing, if you can.
I laugh because I don't do permitting. But I'm gonna talk briefly over this dual mandate of protection and reasonable beneficial use. You can't protect or allocate or use what you don't know and you don't know what you don't measure. So part of our role at the Commission on Water Resource Management is to monitor our aquifers, monitor our streams. So part of my role and responsibility is to conduct stream surveys, monitor stream discharge across the state, and we use that information to inform recommendations. In terms of permitting and regulation, on the stream protection and management side, we have two types of regulations: stream diversion works permits, which are construction permits to remove water from a stream channel, and then stream channel alteration permits. Those are permits that are used to protect or alter a stream channel, such as a bridge that has a pier in the stream. So that is a permit to alter the stream, but you're not removing any water from the stream. In designated water management areas, we also issue water use permits for surface water, and those are in Navaeha, on Maui, and most recently in Lahaina. On the groundwater side, we have groundwater or a well construction permit, which is similarly a construction permit that has a definite deadline, and then a pump installation permit associated with that well, and then in water management areas, a water use permit. I don't know if I covered what you asked me to, but
Definitely. Just some follow-up questions. Can you share with us, or do you have any metrics or data for current stream levels in Kohala? Anything to compare it to, like baseline or the most recent readings?
Definitely. I will reiterate that we have limited financial resources statewide to monitor all of our water resources, so we have to prioritize. We do have one USGS gauging station that the Commission funds through a cooperative agreement, which will be renewed annually in August. So in 19 days, we're renewing that. And that is on Owinipuali, up in just north of where the flume that was on the Kohala ditch. So it monitors natural flow on the Owinipuali stream. It's not a real-time station, so we don't get that information in real time, but you can look at the historic flows over the last 6 years, and we are prioritizing maintaining that stream gauge. So we have an index station, if you will, of natural flow conditions in this area. The Water Commission has also installed one monitoring station on a stream just west of there. And we are looking at installing additional stations to better characterize flow regimes across the region. Understanding that with climate change, flow regimes are expected to change, getting a sense for how much water is actually available is really important for making future management recommendations.
And what stream is that again?
Iole is the most recent station installed by staff, and then we're looking at maybe North Kohala or somewhere else.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Waimea water source services. John, there's several questions, so I'll just start with the first few. Please tell us more about North Kohala's aquifer. How is the aquifer monitored, and what are the long-term impacts of drilling water? What evidence can we base our decisions on, and what practices can we implement to ensure that we're not damaging, but rather protecting our aquifer for future generations?
Well, the biggest thing to remember when you talk about aquifers throughout the state, they're managed by seaward. Seaward actually goes through a very long process. It's pretty complex. You can look it up online, but they do what's called a RAM2 model, and they determine what's referred to as sustainable yield. A sustainable yield is the amount of water that can be pulled from the ground without negatively impacting the aquifer on a daily basis. One of the things to remember about the Hawaii aquifers is they're a little different than a lot of the ones you see on the mainland, in that most of these are actually flowing. The rainfall on the land slowly works its way down, and then it's moving towards the ocean. It can go through several different structures in there. There can be dike systems, which are basically vertically impounding the water. There can also be what is called high-level water, water that's been pushed back a little bit in the mountain. There can also be perched aquifers that are sitting on top of a layer that for some reason it doesn't pass through. So it's a pretty complex process, but at the most basic level is understanding the sustainable yield and staying within that to avoid any damage to the aquifer itself. Now the good news is if something bad does start to happen, namely the chlorides begin to rise, it's also realized that the basal aquifer, the one that's at sea level, you're never going to pump it down. It doesn't go anywhere because the seawater will come in. What you'll actually see is you'll start to see a rise in chlorides if you're doing something wrong in the area. So the key is, one of the important elements though, is it's not permanent. If something starts to happen, you stop pumping, the flow will eventually return it back to its equilibrium, the equilibrium it was at before. Which is important to realize that even though we're not exactly sure, we can watch it through close monitoring, avoid any damage or pulling anything into that we don't want to see. Now, the other thing as far as the strategies go, it's a real important element in Kohala to realize that Kohala is not all the same, and we all know this. When you get out near Polo and beyond, it gets really dry. As you go towards the valleys, it gets really wet. When you look at the sustainable yields, it's reflected in that. When you look at the Hawai'i aquifer, which essentially goes about from the point all the way back to the beginning of the valleys, its sustainable yield is about 11 million gallons a day, as you can see on documentation. But as soon as you hit the Waimea aquifer, it jumps up to 110 million gallons a day. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, but it's going to take a lot of the same strategies that were used to build the ditch, moving water from the wet areas to the dry areas. Now, it's also important to that is realizing that you don't need to necessarily follow the only ditch line. The ditch line was the technology at the time, flowing it down a ditch line, tunneling through the ground, and let's be honest, today, we're not doing a lot of hard rock tunneling in Hawaii, especially where we put people in it or anything else. That gets a little difficult and a little hairy. It's also extremely expensive, but there's a lot of new technology, even going as far as pumping or picking up the water at different locations and allowing it to flow in to minimize the impact in the areas that have lower sustainable yields.
Two follow-up questions. Assuming that you could have water sharing agreements between parcels, what is the estimated number of wells needed to serve majority of North Kohala, and what will we do if there is a drought?
Well, first of all, just touching on the drought element, droughts tend to be shorter lived, a couple of years, whereas the aquifer takes much more time to both fill up and draw down. So from a water flow standpoint, wells are a good reserve in the event of a drought. The bigger issue that comes up during a drought is the demand goes up, because as of course there's less rainfall, higher demand for irrigation. What was the other part of that? There's a lot of different ways this question goes.
What will we do if there's a drought?
Oh, that'll handle the drought. As far as the number of wells, one of the things about the land here is it is actually pretty porous. The well, for example, out in Polo that everyone's seen on the side of the road being worked on, that was pump tested about 900 gallons a minute. That's approximately 1.2 million gallons a day. But when you look at the Hawai'i aquifer, you can only realistically put about 7 of those in this region. There are more than that, but of course there are lower flow levels. One of the things you want to minimize doing is extra piping and extra lift. Energy and water, in the case of pumping, are essentially interchangeable. So what you want to do is you only want to lift the water as high as it needs to go in order to be used for its intended purposes. A lot of times you'll see people trying to do simplified systems where they put a tank at the top, they pump everything up and then flow it down. while it simplifies the system, it dramatically increases energy consumption. So what you need to do is you'll have to identify your actual needs of water, and you'll adjust the well size, location, pumping volume, and a total lift in order to maximize the return on the amount of energy and the size of the systems that you put in to deliver the water at the lowest cost and lowest energy cost. Again, with water, the big part of the factor is the infrastructure and the energy really drive what that water costs, and there's a very, very major impact on agriculture, of course, with tighter margins.
Thank you, John. Next up, we have the Department of Water Supply, Keith Okamoto and Kurt Inaba. 2 questions. What is the process of getting groundwater? Please explain the drilling requirements for potable water compared to agricultural water. Additionally, are individual wells monitored for consumption, and are there any regulations regarding consumption?
First of all, thanks Uncle David for the invite and to be part of the discussion. And I think like John mentioned earlier, it kind of goes back to those guys over here to my right.
Not me, though.
Yeah, they're kind of smiling, they're snickering because actually that's a question for them. But for us as any well driller in the state, whether it be private or municipal entities such as ourselves, we need to get that well construction permit from the State Commission on Water Resource Management. And with that comes reporting requirements. You need to report monthly what you're pumping out of there. Us as a drinking water utility, what I want to share with everybody, well, first of all, who is on county water? All right, thank all you guys. Appreciate it, and appreciate your patience when we have issues as well. But we appreciate everybody in the community because we're actually here to serve the whole community, which is why we're involved in this ag discussion as well. But getting back to the question, for drinking water, there's a ton of regulations. So we got to monitor both at the source and within the distribution system. I can't go into the details. That's a question that maybe Kurt can touch upon. But there's a ton of things that we need to test for monthly, sometimes on different terms, on different durations, a bunch of things basically to prove that the water is safe to drink. But again, that being said, like everybody else, if we want to drill a well for our system, we need to go through the permitting process with seaworm, which involves knowing how much you want to pump from where, and it's tied to what John talked about, the sustainable yield. All that goes into determining whether or not that permit is viable to process. Us as the driller need to provide seaworm with whatever information they need so they can make their decision to approve or not approve the well. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure.
Kurt can respond with more specifics.
And if Kurt has anything to add to that.
Yes, I know the question on individual wells. We don't really get involved with that, but I know as far as monitoring and reporting, I know that is a requirement, and I know seaworm has worked really hard so to help make it easier for the individuals to do so. That mainly because it made it easier for us to report our own pumping also. But maybe seaworm, I know you don't have the groundwater people here, but you guys want to?
As far as
the reporting for the individual wells.
All water users, whether it's surface water or groundwater, has to report monthly their individual use. I mean, that's statewide. So we have, actually, one of the slides was the total monthly pumpage for the last 20 years of the Hawai'i Aquifer system. So if anybody's curious, we can throw that out there.
Yeah, if we could provide that later, we can look it up. Thank you.
Just as someone speaking that actually does the reporting each month for several wells, it's for a well, it's usually depth of water, total pumpage, and electroconductivity. Electroconductivity tells you how much salt's in the water. Remember I was talking about where you'll see a rise in salinity? That's one of the things you're watching for. Changes in temperature also reflect the changes in flow. So everything we do is trying to recognize any subtle changes that begin to take place. Seaworm, of course, be made aware of it, and then we can make any adjustments necessary.
Appreciate it. Thank you, John. Moving on to Hawaii Drilling Pump Service, Fred Camaro. Fred, how difficult is it to obtain a drilling permit? What determines designated areas where water might or might not be available? And are there any specific specifications around property size?
Thank you for the question, and I want to thank David and
Kohala community for having me on this panel. I was born and raised on Lanai, so this part of the island is very near and dear to me because it reminds me so much of my hometown. But the last time I was actually in this gym was about 10 years ago. My son was playing in a high school basketball for a school, I'm not the name. And I just remember the Kohala Cowboys smashed us. So I remember the crowd being so passionate and energetic, and I hope you guys are passionate and energetic for water as you are with your Kohala Cowboys. But we've been talking a lot about surface water with the Kohala ditch. There is, John mentioned about groundwater and high-level water and perched water. So that's where we come in. We are a specialized contractor that drills into the ground to gain access to these aquifers. It's hard work, hard drilling, hard basalt. So what we do is very risky and difficult, yet very rewarding and vital to the community. What we do, we have to rely on so many people. We have to rely on our friends from the Water Commission who, with their well construction standards, make sure we are constructing the well in accordance with their standards. We have to rely on friends from the Department of Water Supply. We deal with them mainly on the pump side, so we have to make sure that our pumps are specified in accordance with their directives to make sure that the wells are reliable and the water is safe for drinking. And then we got friends who rely, smart guys like John Richards, consultants who are engineers and geologists to help with the design of the well and the pump itself. But that's actually one of the questions that I have that gets asked of me a lot is how long does it take for the permits, the well construction permits and the pump installation permits to take? And because of so many people involved with the constructing of a well, it takes short answer, I don't know. We have to apply for a well construction permit, and in that process, we need to make sure our design is correct, like what has been said already. We have to go through several CWRM has to go through several agencies, specifically SHPD, State Historic Preservation Division, Department, where we've got to make sure that where we are drilling does not impact any archaeological or hayhouse or things of that nature. Recently, there's also been this Kapa'au analysis, where we are making sure that there are no impacts with traditionary and customary practices with the native Hawaiians. We've got to make sure that the area is not in a special management area. It's not in a conservation district. It's not in a designated groundwater management area. So you need another type of permit, a water use permit. So those are some of the challenges for obtaining a well construction permit. And then once we drill the well, case the well, test pump the well, based on the results of the test, then we can determine, then we can apply for a pump installation permit. Sometimes we do that in conjunction with the well construction permit, but typically you want to make sure your well can produce before you actually go ahead and apply for the pump installation permit.
Thank you, Fred. Next up, we have USDA-NRCS Andrew Stout. Question for you will be, please share the NRCS program related to surface water catchments and reservoirs.
If you're not familiar with NRCS, every county in the country has an NRCS office. Yours is in Waimea, in the back of the Parker Ranch Center. Our core mission is to help people help the land. So what we do is we work with private landowners, typically farmers and ranchers. We develop a comprehensive plan, and we look at protecting soil, water, animals, plants, air, and And basically we try to help you farm or ranch better so you can do it for a longer period of time. We have lots of experts. I'm an engineer. We have biologists, archaeologists, foresters, grazing specialists. Our services are free. You just contact the office. We'll send a planner out to the farm or the ranch, meet with you, and we try to look at what's going right and what's not going right on the farm. We come up with a plan together. All our advice is free. You can take it or leave it. But if you do follow our advice, there's funding available. Typically, we cost share, meaning the client puts the money up front first, and then we reimburse at a set rate. It's typically 50 or 90% of material and labors to install these systems. Most of my work revolves around water. I design stock water drinking systems, irrigation systems, animal waste, field roads, erosion control structures. But for livestock drinking water, one of the things that I help design are catchment systems, meaning we catch rainwater, we store them, and then we run it out to the fields and pipelines for animals to drink. Lots of locations on the island have no source for agriculture or drinking water. So these systems can be vital for a farm or ranch to survive. I've done really small ones from a simple roof that might be 20 by 20 with a 10,000 gallon tank for 1 or 2 cows to the biggest herd I've ever done catchment for is 600 cattle, which that system probably cost $250,000 and had a big reservoir and a big catchment area that was lined. So these aren't cheap systems, but we help pay for them, which is nice. So you can sign up for information, and I have some handouts. And if you have any questions about water, as far as agriculture goes, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Historically, before pre-contact era, North Kohala fed themselves with about 30,000 population. Deep soil, diverse climate zones, and potentially abundant water source and open space, we have the capability of contributing to our state vision of food sustainability. North Kohala is one of the few communities without state agricultural parks. With state lands available in North Kohala, what are the possibilities of creating agricultural parks with these long-term leases for the future generation?
Thank you. My seat got really hot all of a sudden over here. I wanted to start by saying that I believe that ADC is one of the greatest gifts the Ledge has ever given the people of Hawaii. And I would challenge you to take action and read our statute, which is 163D. A lot of times people want to know what's the difference between ADC, DLNR, and the Department of Ag. We were given the most amazing powers, and it was a challenge for us to step in as sugar and pineapple was stepping out and to help diversify the ag economy of Hawaii. So the ADC was given the power to purchase land. In the case of DLNR, they can purchase land, they can also condemn land. In the case of Department of Ag, they can condemn land. So we can purchase land, which is really important. One of the things that happened on my drive over is if I had $1 for every time that interim appointee Nathan Trump said Kohala is a community driven by action, I could have a new iPad for my son on the way home. So I would suggest that you take action and you write the governor and say thank you for appointing an interim voice for the island of Hawaii, because there has not been an appointee from the island of Hawaii for over a decade. He is your voice. Raise your hand. I'm going to ask that you take action in the next Ledge session, and you will need to write and call in to support him as a bona fide board member. He is interim appointed right now. We are here to show respect to the Kohala community, and we brought 3 sets of ears. So I'm here, we have our interim appointed board member Trump, and we also have Chair Tabata. Raise your hand, gonna give a shout out. So it's a chance for you guys to talk story with us. We're here to listen. And one of the things that we did this past year is we listened to the island of Kauai. And one of the things they were very concerned about was DLNR was going to shut down the East Kauai irrigation system, and they asked for us to step in. We are taking control of the East Kauai irrigation system through an EO. We are adding 6 new employees to the island, and we're here to listen to you of what it is that you guys need. And one of the strongest things that you can do if you want to have a presence of ADC in your community is you get on our website and you fill out an expression of interest, because it makes it a lot easier for me to go to Representative Tarnas, Senator Richards, and say, we have 20 applications and Kohala wants 20,000 acres of land to go back into food production. Then with that, it helps us go to the ledge and ask for money to buy. So that's one of the things you can do. When you look at the powers that have been given to ADC, it is nothing short of incredible. We are like nothing that exists in the United States. We have the ability to purchase lands. We are currently operating 2 hydropower plants on the island of Kauai. And we can issue revenue bonds. We can issue special purpose revenue bonds. We can also form subsidiaries. Those are kind of some unusual powers that don't sit in a lot of different departments. We are administratively attached to Dept, but we're here to listen to you guys. You have to tell us, what do you want? What do you need? Is it water? Is it land? What role should we play? And if you're introverted like my 2 daughters, you can certainly talk to Representative Board Member Trump after this event, but please bend the ear of our Chairman Tabata and myself and tell us what you need and how we can get involved. Did that answer your question?
What's your website?
It's just Google Agribusiness Development Corp and it's under Dept. The EOI is 1 page. You can do it over an espresso. It's really fast. And you can tell us that, hey, we want to buy land. Hey, there's a building that we think you guys should buy because we need to have cooling. Hey, there's a water system we think that you guys should take over. You fill it out. The board is a working board. We currently have 7 permitted interaction groups going simultaneously. We're working on our strategic plan. We are working on a CIP plan for the next 10 years. You guys need to belly up to the bar and tell us how we can get involved and support your community. The ADC was founded with 3 goals in mind. The first one is to grow more local food. The second one is to develop an ag export business. We're in the fight of our life for suitcase share. If every suitcase, well, let's just say 25% of all the suitcases leaving Hawaii had some ag product in it, we've just created a $500 million industry. The third thing that is in our statute is we were created to be an aggressive and dynamic leader in ag. You need to talk to your board member Trump and tell him what that looks like. And you need to talk to Chair Tabata and tell him what that looks like. But we are here to support you. We're here to listen. Please talk to us.
But this is the stepping stone, and this is the framework for what we need for the future. And the future is water, land, but the ultimate goal is food sustainability, so we can continue to live and eat here in Kohala.
So now's the time in these smaller groups to have some discussions. What are our reflections, reactions? Do folks have any questions that were unanswered? Are there still things that you want to know and would like answers to? This is a time to acknowledge those. It's also a time to, I know one of the panelists shared, just the action orientation, or maybe it was a quote from Nathan, how Kohala is about action. And so this whole process that the Agriculture Working Group is hosting is to support individuals to take action and collectively to take action. So as we're in these conversations, we're encouraging that we all hold that lens of what's my role in this? What am I willing to do? As all the information that's collected will be given to the Agriculture Working Group, the Water Group, that will continue to inform and move forward the work. everyone's invited to join that agriculture water group. It's not like a special club. It's just, you know, if you want to show up and have those conversations. Our agriculture working group meets the last Thursday of every month at the meeting at the Hub Barn. And we rotate which working groups meet, but water is one of those groups. So we encourage you to join there. About the debrief that our facilitation team just had. We are going to compile all the information and we'll make that available on a Google Doc that we'll share out in our email list. So if you guys registered online for this event or if you signed in today, then we have your email and you'll be getting those communications so you can check it out for yourself. And I apologize for having my phone, but the chart paper, I had too many pages and all those things. So that's what I'm looking at, the notes that we took here. And again, this is not just me, this is all of our facilitation team that compiled this. So first of all, there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. And there was a lot of gratitude for all the panelists who came and shared. And thank you to those who are still here in the crowd with us. We really appreciate your time. There was a request for more visuals, you know, a desire to see more maps, to understand more about the landscape and past and current water systems. There was definitely interest in another water summit and or more conversations in order to figure out the how we do this. We need to have more conversations, highlighting the things that the community doesn't know about. Having panelists here was really eye-opening for folks, right? Folks got to put faces with names, understand a little bit more about what different organizations do, but there's still a lot of interest. People want more of that. People want to understand where to get the information and how do they navigate where to get that information. There's a lot of like, okay, we have all these different entities, but where's the one place where we can find all the answers? And so I don't know what that is, but there's that curiosity of like, who holds this information and then what is the community's role in that? So there was a lot of interest in finding ways to have ongoing conversations with the panelists and the experts who are in the room today. How can we continue to have that conversation with our community in that dialogue? There's also a lot of openness right now. There was some of the facilitators noticed a greater interest today than we've seen in some of the other sessions that we've held around alternatives to just the ditch being the only solution for water in Kohala. So there's a lot of conversation around honoring the traditional ecological knowledge as a guiding force, you know, recognizing that the forest is really important in the water cycle. The ideas of like adopt a stream or kind of like self-monitoring, how do we have community-based monitoring of these precious resources. There was interest in alternatives besides the ditch, such as reservoirs, the idea of smaller shared use wells, curiosity about the Upolu well, curiosity about the reservoir, Mauka of Lincoln, interest in redundancy and hybrid systems, interest in systems that have a backup generators, how do we understand how to make these systems resilient. There was an interest in more information on that. There was a lot of curiosity in who manages the ditch. There was a lot of excitement today about the ABC. I think a lot of people learned for the first time or re-engaged with the Agribusiness Development Corporation and what's possible for that partnership and support here in Kohala. There's also curiosity like, could the ADC or could Hawaii Department of Agriculture be the entity that manages the ditch? What would that take and what would that look like? Obviously, there's a desire to get farmers on land and more food being produced and consumed. So what does that look like? What are the kind of ownership and lease structures we can explore? We've heard about ag parks today, but again, the interest in ag parks. There's excitement to explore funding solutions, like what options are out there to fuel some of the vision for what we see is possible. And there were some concerns. There was concerns about how water resources are being utilized, especially relating to like County of Hawaii variances and water being used for things like pools and development.
who and what kind of entities are seeking these variances, and how do we access and subdivide county waters. There's a lot of curiosities there. There's concerns around just issues in access to water lines and how subdividing can create challenges for farmers and ranchers to be able to access land and water. Also, sometimes those subdividing or challenges accessing water creates challenge in family continuing to keep that land in their families for generations. They lose access to the viability of their land by not having access to water. That's something that folks are coming up against with, if some people are ranching, but their neighbors aren't ranching, and so they're not finding shared values around the water in that way. So that's something to explore. And then there's a lot of interest in engagement. We heard a lot of things about ways folks personally want to engage, but also the continuation of this larger community collaboration. We heard interest in those last Thursday of the month agriculture meeting. There was interest that those meetings are hybrid for folks who want to cook dinner or have other kuleana and they can't make it to the meeting. So we hear that concern, no guarantees there, but we can work towards that. Let's see, there was an interest in seeing more kupuna in the conversations and more educators. And there was an interest in also, on the other side of that, there was an interest in seeing more youth and how do we engage the youth? And how do we have that agricultural educational pipeline where there's opportunities for school gardens and folks to get involved along the way to really hear those youth voices in our process. So that was a lot of what we heard. I'm sure there's a lot more, but those are some of the common themes. And again, we will have this information accessible for you to explore, and we will continue to have the conversations in our last Thursday of the month agriculture working group. You guys can get our email.
I think we put a dent in what we're trying to do. We planted the seed, we're sowing. Now we gotta get water, we gotta get land. We need everyone's continual momentum moving forward so we can do what we gotta do. So right now I want to call out Peter Abarcar.
Well, when Billy asked us to participate, we had to. When we came to this event last year, went up to David, that was amazing. And moving into this year, talking about bringing water to the area, bringing vegetables and agriculture to culture, with culture to Kohala. We had to answer the call. So I really want to thank all of you for the invitation and my fellow chefs for actually making it.
These guys are impressive. And they were all so, I gotta add this, they were all so happy to see the product when we delivered it. They were like, you guys get more. Can you guys provide this? So we want to grow this Kohala so we can just not feed only ourselves, feed our visitors, be sustainable. Because these guys employ our kids and they teach them how to cook. Okay.
It's you, it's me, it's us. We could bond.